Let's talk about brush economy. Unlike hedge funds and Wall Street, this stuff will actually help you. Brush economy is the idea of using a few carefully thought out, well placed brush strokes in order to indicate light, form, and texture, rather than using a million different brushes in order to render something hyper realistically. Brush economy is all about conserving your brushwork in order to create an impression of what you see rather than a literal copy of it. It's all those painterly textured brush strokes that you see in like the old-timey classical paintings where it looks so beautifully rendered and believable, but then when you zoom in, you see that it's just a stunning array of very well-placed, very textured, flat brushwork with occasional, very tightly controlled areas of blending. But Srish, I hear you say, what if I do want to paint hyper-realistically? Sit down. This is gonna make you a better artist because it's gonna teach you to be conscious and present when you paint and really think about all the brushwork that you're putting into it. Don't click away. Listen to your father. That's me, I'm your daddy now. Sit down, put your listening ears on. Don't make me say it twice. Today we're working off of this incredible tutorial by Tyler. Great guy, does some amazing art, but this video breaks down how he approaches tightly controlled brushwork, and it is really, really good, and I will absolutely link it down in the description below. Make sure you go watch it next. In fact, do you just want me to make a playlist of all the really helpful art tutorials I find on YouTube? Let me know in the comments and I'll put one together. But yeah, today we're going to work on head number 4 of our 100 heads painting challenge that we started last week, because I find that when it comes to learning a new skill, it is always best to practice it on a photo study because you already know what the end result is going to look like, so you can focus mostly on how you get there, which is the perfect way to approach skills training. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give me a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more art content every single week. Comment below what your experience, challenges, and successes with brushwork have been, and come say hello on social media. All my links are in the description below. Alrighty, without much further ado, let's dive into some brush economy. Before we even put paint on the canvas, the first thing Tyler says to do is to plan out your brushwork. And one thing I never even thought would be part of this is shape language. But looking back, of course shape language is a huge part of good brush economy, duh. But what you basically want to do is look at your sketch, or in our case, your reference, and break it into small, medium, and large shapes. To get us started, I've gone ahead and imported the reference into Krita, and I'm going to use a grey-blue to show large shapes, green is medium, and orange is small shapes. And then we're going to use these colours to simplify and flatten the reference. Starting with the blue-grey, our largest shape is definitely the very, very flat black background. It frames her entire head and really cuts out a beautiful silhouette. Another relatively large shape is the shadow on the dark side of her face. It has nuance, but for the moment we're going to try to simplify everything, and the values here are close enough to each other that we can make it one shape. In fact, that shape even goes all the way down to the side of her neck and torso. Like, if you squint at the reference and let your eyes go blurry, it looks like one long shape. Let's now move on to the green and find some medium shapes. Again, squinting really helps, and immediately the shadows in her hair seem like a continuous inverted L. At this point, I also realized that the bright side of her face, from just under her eye all the way down to her chin, could be one large shape. So I went back with the grey and marked that out. We're not looking for nuance here yet, we're just mapping out shapes. Also, the triangle of light on the shadow side of her face can be one flat shape, as can the T-zone of her forehead and nose. Can't forget the brightness in her neck and shoulder, that can be one medium shape as well. And then whatever's left is essentially our smaller shapes. And as you might expect, these lie at the very core of the facial features. So the eyes, nose, and mouth. Now, here's where it might get a little controversial, because if you squint at her hair, all of that highlight could also be a continuous medium shape. But here's why I marked it as a small shape instead. The highlight of the hair is where I want to create tons and tons of texture. Since most of the painting is going to be a flat black and smooth-ish skin, I want the highlights in her hair to really give us that nice crunchy texture that will balance this all out for us. And you can see with the image made invisible, just the shapes alone give us a pretty decent idea of what we're looking at. Now, I'm not going to paint on top of this because that's basically tracing, and we don't do tracing in this house. It teaches you nothing. What I did instead was export this image and stick it onto my PureRef, and that way when I eventually had my sketch down, I could use this map as a reference and be mindful of my brushwork. So now that we have a solid detailed plan, it is finally time to get some painting done. So I went ahead and made the most basic sketch ever, and it really doesn't matter if the sketch is any good, because what we're essentially going to do is paint very opaque, flat brush strokes on top of this. I started with the largest shape of all, the black background. Literally just flattened the entire background in. We're really not worried about accuracy quite yet. Then I grabbed a deep shadow tone and flattened in the shadow shape in her cheek and neck. What we're essentially doing is reverse engineering the shape map that we built before, but this time we're using the right colors and values. The large highlight shape of the face was next, and then we moved on to the medium shapes. I flattened the hair in first just to make it easy to see the silhouette, and then went about getting the medium shapes in the skin in. This was quick because there were like 3 of them. Finally, we zoom in a little and set about working on the smallest shapes. Again, we're not thinking about blending or very, very small details at this point. We're just indicating flat areas of light, shadow, and color. Man, I have to say, this was the absolute fastest I've ever managed to map out the shapes of a face. Like, looking at the real-time footage, this whole thing took less than 10 minutes to get a decent looking face in place. I never even considered the fact that conserving your brush strokes and painting mindfully could actually save you so much time. In fact, I genuinely believed it would do the opposite, that having to think about each mark you make would essentially double the time you took. But I guess all that pre-planning really does pay dividends. I think once this kind of painting workflow is integrated into my muscle memory, my next goal is going to be able to do this without making a physical shape map. At this point, I changed to a flat horizontal bristle brush that came preloaded in Krita and started adding in color variation. I picked this brush because while it does still put down a flat tone, it leaves textured ends and also has just enough opacity dynamics to be able to create the tiniest bit of blending, but without completely losing your edges. Remember, we want to preserve that painterly look, which requires a lot of hard edges. That said though, making every single part of the face hard-edged would, ironically, cause us to lose that painterly effect, because then it becomes like trying to find a hay in a haystack. What we need to do is make the texture stand out, and that requires contrast. So what we're going to have to do is throw in little bits of soft blending. I didn't actually use a blender brush at all, I just color picked and blended in that way. So like the base of the cheek, for instance, we want that rosy area to be softer so that the highlight at the top of the cheekbone as well as the plane shift next to her upper lip show up nice and defined. Same with the chin, we want that mid-tone nice and blended so the highlight on the top plane and the shadow in the cleft of her chin really pop. I struggled with the eyes a little, particularly with the placement. I feel like with this model's expression here, the eyes hold so much of her personality. Like, without the eyes there, the rest of her face just feels flat and lifeless. So I really did spend a lot of time getting the tones in the eyes to look like the reference. But I am glad we did this on a study. It would be so much harder to learn brush economy if we were working on an original painting, because trying to figure out brushwork while also trying to make a good painting would have been absolutely impossible. There were a lot of times during this process where I had to stop myself from reverting back to mindless rendering, hit the undo several times, and repaint certain areas with a more structured, better thought out approach. It was essentially a process of retraining the brain. The hair specifically is where I struggled with this the most. I'm so used to going in and doing a million brush strokes to indicate hair, but we're not trying to do that today. Dude, it was so hard to stop every few minutes and go back and redo the hair, because that texturing process is so hardwired into my brain. Plus, we do actually want that gloss to be a textured area in the painting, so it was just all about trying to find a balance. I had to switch to Photoshop for a bit of liquify because the liquify transform in Krita is just not large enough. I tried to match her likeness as best I could, and after a couple of tiny adjustments, here's the finished portrait. I really love how it looks cohesive and very well rendered from afar, but then if you zoom in, you can see all the little brush marks and like painterly texture. Ooh, I love it so much. I don't think I've ever felt more present while painting in like 13 years of painting, but I didn't even put on music when I was working on this head. That's incredible. And also I feel like this is some of the best painting I've ever done. But what do you guys think? Have you always conserved your brushwork? Is that painterly textured look something you enjoy in your art? Comment below and let me know. If you enjoyed this video and learned something today, then please do let me know by giving it a big thumbs up and subscribing to my channel. And of course you can come say hello on Instagram, Discord and Kara. I have links to all of those in the video description below. As always, if you enjoy what I do and would like to grab even more content such as all of my art in 4K and 8K quality, the speed paints for all of them from start to finish, early access to these videos completely ad-free, as well as my custom brush kit and prints of my work every few months. It is all up on Patreon. Your support on that allows me to keep making all this content for you. So I'll leave a link up here in the cards and in the description below, and thank you so much for checking it out. Alrighty you guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I really hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. If you're wondering about the first 3 heads in our 100 heads challenge, I only started last week, so I'll leave that video here in the outro. You will definitely enjoy it, so make sure you check it out, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye!